everybody. Welcome to Movie Talk, the show where we talk about movies. And we have our resident reviewer, Alex Rife, here. Hi, Alex.
Hello.
And joined by our Laughing Place co-founder, Rebecca Mosley.
Hey, everybody. I'm looking forward to hearing about Sundance from Alex.
So what we're going to talk about today, we got two topics. One is Hoppers. Alex got to attend what I think they now call Early Access Day. So he can't give a review, but he can give his take and what he learned about the film. And then we're going to have him do Sundance, and we're going to talk about Sundance. He's going to rank how many films did you do?
It was either 11 or 12.
Okay, he's going to rank them, and we'll talk as he goes through them. We'll talk about what each of those, what he thought, going from 12 to 1.
Oh, 12. I only did my top 10.
Okay.
Well, ooh, 2 get left out.
That was what I was told to do.
Okay. Then let's do the 10. Which 2 did you leave out?
Carousel and the money one. All About the Money.
Okay. So
those did not make the 10.
You can briefly talk about those, and then we'll go into your top 10. Okay. If you're wondering why, it's been crazy at Disney today. It's been bonkers, and I can't tell you why, but I would pay attention to Laughing Place next week because there's a lot going down. I don't even know half of it, but just won't stop. But in any case, I want to learn about Hoppers, which tickets went on sale this week on Wednesday. They're doing an early access screening on February 28th, I believe. But then it'll come out March 6th. And what did you learn about Hoppers, Alex, over at Pixar Animation Studios, Mr. Fancy Pants?
I learned a lot. So it comes from Daniel Chong, who's the director, who I knew that he had made a name for himself over at Cartoon Network on the show We Bear Bears. I didn't know that he had worked in story at both Disney Animation and Pixar Animation before doing his Cartoon Network show. I got to interview him and producer Nicole Grindle. One of the questions that I asked was there anything that he learned doing TV, which is a much faster pace of creating an animated story than a film is, that he was able to bring back to Pixar? And he talked about how the deadline process of TV made it so they kind of used that when they made the film, even though it took 6 years to make. They kind of applied that to, like, each time they were going to be putting together a screening and they would make changes. He kind of treated it like, we're starting over with a new episode, kind of a deal. It originally was pitched to Pete Docter as a story about penguins. So that was interesting to know that beavers wasn't originally the intention. And even though there's the joke about how it's like Avatar, in reality, what inspired it is actual animal scientists do have these robotic versions of animals that they are sometimes able to put into a wild group of animals and trick them into thinking this is another one of theirs. They showed us examples of monkeys where, like, one of the monkey's eyes is clearly a camera, and like they just spritz this stuffed animal monkey with like pheromones, hormones, whatever, to make the monkeys think like, oh yeah, this is another monkey. It's cool for it to be here. They've done it with penguins, and specifically with penguins, they've done it with like robotic penguins that are on like Wall-E rollers that can like wheel around the Arctic, and they're observing and learning about penguin behavior in the wild without them knowing that a human is behind it. So that was what inspired the science of the mechanical beaver that Mabel inhabits. The rest of it is Avatar, but there's also a lot of like 1980s influence. So if you're a fan of like Back to the Future or Weird Science or any of those like 80s sci-fi comedies, you're probably going to see some direct parallels with Hoppers. It's very fun, very funny. It's a different type of humor than we're used to from Pixar, but not so different that it feels wrong. And it just feels very fresh, I would say, for that reason. I loved it. Another thing about that early Pixar press day was they taught us a lot about the science of beaver behavior, and it became very apparent. In following National Geographic and covering a lot of their stuff, you often hear about keystone species, and it usually is like a predator. In the case of beavers, for like prairies and marshlands, beavers are a keystone species, even though they're vegetarians, because they create these habitats that bring everybody to the water environment that then creates a feeding ground for animals, for predatory animals. But like they've done a lot of studies, when you take a beaver out of these habitats, you very quickly lose all the other animals that are in there. That's something that's kind of integral to the story of Hoppers. You've seen in the trailer that Mabel is fighting to stop this freeway from being put in that's going to take over this like last remaining beaver pond in the city. But it's when you hear the actual science behind it, it becomes a lot more powerful. But I really loved Hoppers. I can't say enough great things about it. Partially legally because I'm not allowed to review it yet. So I sang high praise in 120 characters or less on Twitter/X, and beyond that, I don't know what I can say until the review embargo lifts. But you can get a behind the scenes look in our coverage, our first of several pieces of coverage from the early press day.
You know what else is a keystone species? An ecron. That's where I learned where the keystone species was from Flight of Passage, which means this is just like Avatar.
It's nothing like Avatar.
Were you familiar with his television animation work?
I wasn't. So this event was like at nighttime. We went over to Pixar. We thought we were seeing 30 minutes of the movie. They showed us the whole movie. And then when I got back to the hotel room, and I loved the movie so much, I decided I should really check out We Bare Bears, because I had no exposure to like an episode of it. I had been exposed to like art from it at like Annecy and Lightbox Expo. Like I've heard a lot of praise for the show, but I hadn't actually checked it out. It's very cute, very sweet. I had kind of this assumption that everything on Cartoon Network would be Amazing World of Gumball and Uncle Grandpa and like all these like really, really silly shows that I maybe found a little like, I don't know, edgier than like Disney TV animation, and just didn't feel right for me as an adult. So I never checked a lot of it out. And I think We Bare Bears could have easily been a hit on Disney Channel. Like it doesn't feel necessarily foreign to the brand. It just happened to end up at Cartoon Network.
Okay.
It's funny how this may be the first time that when you walked into that interview, the director was more familiar with your work than you were of his work.
It was nice when they, because they have you slate your name when you sit down and do these interviews. Like it's more for the people who are operating the junket to know who to send the file to in the end. So you say your name and your outlet, and then they go. When I said Laughing Place, he goes, "Oh, I love Laughing Place." So you know, it's always nice to be validated in that way.
Benji, you and Alex have both been following, Disney and Pixar movie releases for many years now. What does it say?
Might say 30.
Okay. What does it say that he arrived, that Alex arrived thinking he was going to get a small peek and instead had a full screening? What does that say to you both about the way Disney feels about this? I'll start with I'll ask Ben.
I think that combined with the preview screenings that they're doing, that they're confident about it.
Okay.
I mean, and it seems rightfully so. Not reviews, but social reactions have been pretty positive, and social reactions typically positive, but it seems like they have it, but they also know that Pixar original films have not necessarily been able to carry themselves. Not as, it's more complicated than just simply that, but that they need to put a little effort to get the word out on this one, and a little bit more open than they will be with Toy Story 5. Alex is not going to see, I imagine, all of Toy Story 5 at the long early access day, because that they know Toy Story 5 is going to sell itself. This one, they know they need to be a little bit more, hey, let's get the word out. This is good. This isn't just this is something special, and it sounds like it's been successful thus far.
Did you get any feeling, Alex, about like a different kind of marketing? Because I know one of the challenges that we've seen on the consumer side is people kind of push back on the notions of sequels or reboots or whatever. But then Disney isn't seeing strong box office, it seems, from an original storyline. Anything about that this is like a different way of maybe trying to break through or anything like that?
I think it was less. I my gut tells me it was less about that and more the fact that they actually had this one fully done and ready. Oftentimes, when they do these early press days, it's like 3 months before the film is released, and they've basically finished like core animation, but they might still be refining effects or rendering final frames. They maybe haven't fully scored the film yet. In the case of Hoppers, it could have been released earlier. I think it's been done for a little bit and they're holding it for like a spring break release. So I think that was the main function behind them showing us all of the film rather than, the first act as like a work in progress. Um, but there does seem to be more energy and buzz around Hoppers than generated itself naturally around like Elio or Onward or Turning Red. Part of that is I think they know that the Tom the lizard pushing the lizard emoji bit that went viral, and that's an opportunity for them to keep leaning into it. He's not a huge part of the film. Like, they didn't go back and retrofit and like make sure that there was more Tom in the film or anything. Like, Tom doesn't feel in there more than he has a need to be because he is one of many side characters. So you don't walk away feeling like, oh, they forced more Tom in here or anything like that. But I think they know that they have something that could be very special, that could be very big, and could break through. But the truth is, when it comes to animated films in general, lately, if they're not an already established IP, they have not been doing well. You look at Encanto and how that did nothing at the box office, and then it came to Disney Plus, and then it became huge. Sony passed on putting K-pop Demon Hunters in theaters and let Netflix take it off their hands for the same fear that like this isn't going to find an audience in theaters. Families aren't going to see a movie that they don't know for sure is going to do something for them. So this time around, I think they're trying to change it up and say, here's an original film that you really should bring the family to see on the big screen. I think that's the message they're going. They want Hoppers to take off right away. They don't want it to wait 3 or 4 months for its streaming debut to become a phenomenon. It otherwise feels primed for that. It's very quotable. It's very funny. Like I said, the humor and tone is very different for Pixar. It's not. I feel like in terms of like comedy, from Toy Story to Bug's Life to Monsters Inc., even when you have different directors in there, there's still kind of a Pixar like buddy comedy trope, tone, format. And not that they haven't broken that before. Turning Red very much broke that mold too, but this just feels like a completely different approach to comedy, to storytelling at Pixar. And it's a great film. I'm gonna try and get Dory to stop barking.
To that end, I just want to let everybody know that on Laughing Place, we've already highlighted some of the movie merchandise that'll be available, the unique popcorn buckets or pins or whatnot that you're able to procure when you go to select theaters. So we have a roundup of those items. And then there's also a Disney Plus perk right now where you can enter to win the opportunity to go to a premiere. And we've got details on that as well on Laughing Place. So I just want to let everybody know that while we're at it. I don't know if Ben wants to talk more Hoppers or if he's ready to go on.
I think we're ready to move on to Sundance, Alex.
To Dance with the Sun. Do we want to start with Disney's films, or do you want me to start with my top 10 list and where the Disney films rank?
I want to go through your top 10 list. I want to hear about all the films. So let's go from top your number 10, and we'll see where the Disney films lay in your assessment.
I feel like we need a little ditty, like number 10,
Yeah. I would love a fun countdown.
I have to work on that.
My number one, and I'm very surprised that this is my number one because I don't like horror films. This was the one horror film I saw out at the festival. Usually when I go to the festival, I try and find films that I think Disney's going to acquire. And this wasn't necessarily in that wheelhouse, but when I read the synopsis, I thought, oh, this sounds like something I should see. It's called Leviticus. And in the vein of horror films that have a like somewhat religious bent to them, being like The Exorcist or Poltergeist or any of those, this one, it's an Australian film. It's these two teenage boys who get caught as lovers, and a religious entity is brought in to perform some kind of ceremony that summons an invisible force that is bent on destroying them if they act on their same-sex desires. And so it appears to them as the object of their affection. It's very calculating in how it approaches. It's very devious, and it's really hard for them to suss out, is this my lover, or is this my entity that's trying to kill me? Like a lot of great horror films, it's not particularly gory. It doesn't have, you never see the thing. It's either invisible or it's presented as one of the two actors. But it was still very chilling. There was one major jump scare where I almost left the theater because I am a wimp when it comes to horror. And so I made sure I got an aisle seat because I did not want to be, stuck there or bothering people trying to leave. But I grinned and bared it, and I'm glad I did. It was really good. I think I've heard that Neon is in the running to potentially acquire distribution on it. If you're talking to us, you're muted, Benji.
It's weird because he's not. But we don't hear him.
We can't hear you at all, so you might need to restart or something. But that was what... Nope.
Do you have a microphone, an external audio input that you may have unplugged? He'll go and come back.
Maybe he'll be right back.
Hopefully.
I want to move on to the next film because there's not much else I can say about it without... It's just a very small cast, obviously very low budget, but that doesn't mean a horror film can't be good. Blair Witch Project, I think, was a Sundance film and had no budget.
But you are historically not somebody who appreciates ick. So
no.
I'm guessing this feels like one of those that it's more about the tension than it is about the visuals. That's the horror.
Exactly. There was not a lot of gore. There was a little bit of blood, but for the most part, it was like very quick and not very graphic. And I appreciated that.
So it's an Alex-friendly horror.
It's mostly an Alex-friendly horror. It was still tough for me to get through, but I made it. I can hear you now, Benji.
Okay. I was gonna look up. I think you're right. It was someone like Neon, who acquired it.
Okay.
But moving on from scary stuff, hopefully, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. Neon grabbed that one.
Oh, so good.
What's your next one?
So next one, one of the Disney films. It's from ESPN's 30 for 30, Give Me the Ball, the Billie Jean King documentary. Structurally, what I really liked about it is for her first-person interviews, she's like talking directly to the camera. And so it really feels like the interviewer barrier is gone. Like she's telling you her story, and she is just a very entertaining persona to listen to. It mostly frames the film around the Battle of the Sexes in 1973. It kind of starts there, and then it backtracks to her upbringing, the barriers that she broke to make the sport of women's tennis something that a lot of people wanted to watch. The fight for equal pay, which is how the whole Battle of the Sexes even came about, because this was a legacy male tennis star who was very adamant that if you're going to Wimbledon and there's a financial prize, a man deserves a much higher prize than a woman deserves for playing tennis. That was where it truly kind of ricocheted out of. And, if you aren't familiar with the Battle of the Sexes and don't want to watch the Emma Stone movie about it, I wasn't particularly familiar. So I liked being a little bit surprised by how that all came about. And that really takes up probably 2/3 of the film. The final part is about kind of everything that happened in her life past that, and much more about her advocacy for the sport of tennis, for women in tennis. It kind of finds a sweet ending spot with the U.S. Open being held at the Brooklyn Billie Jean King Tennis Center. And so, you just kind of feel her legacy really celebrated by the end of the film. And plus, it also has a really nice message. Like, part of her story was she was in college when she met her husband. She left college to focus on her career. And now that, she's in kind of her life's final act, she's back in school finishing her history degree, which is just a really cool thing, that it's like, yeah, my life took me down this other path, but I was also interested in this, and I'm gonna finish what I started. So yeah, I love that. Yeah, her documentary was great. One of my favorite 30 for 30s of all time. Not that I've seen every one, but I've seen quite a few.
I just want to share the picture because this is so sweet. When this coupled with your post with her launching tennis balls out into the audience was so charming. So I'm looking forward to this now.
Yeah, and I guess that's something she's like known for whenever she does public speaking engagements. I didn't know about it, but a lot of people in the audience did. And so like people were like, there were like little sections that were like, over here, Billy. And like, you know, she's obviously a very skilled tennis pro. And so she was able to like get one over into that section. She was sending them up into the balcony. This was like a huge auditorium. And yeah, she was definitely like listening to who was most interested in getting a tennis ball from her and making sure it went to that area. One landed in like two rows behind me. And it was like being at a baseball game when a fly ball comes out where like someone thinks they have it and then they don't have it and they're like really upset about it. So like I could hear behind me someone being like, that was mine. It came right to me and it bounced. And you know, it's like, it is what it is. It's not like anyone took it from the hands of a kid, but you know, it was bad.
That should become an ESPN at some point. We don't know how, what, whatever app or linear, whatever, but it's sort of a typical ESPN-ness. What's number 3?
Number 3 is the National Geographic doc, Time and Water. This is from Sarah Dosa, she directed Fire of Love, which was a film that Nat Geo acquired through Sundance. It went on to be nominated for Best Documentary at the Oscars. I think it had won a Sundance Prize. And this one's kind of similar. For anyone unfamiliar with Fire of Love, that was chronicling 2 volcanologists who met and fell in love because of their interest in volcanoes. Spoiler alert, they also passed away together because of their love of volcanoes. And that film was mostly made up of their own home video footage, but that couple had done a lot of work for National Geographic magazine over their careers, so it felt very fitting for Nat Geo to have it as a home. This one is kind of similar. So it centers around Andri, I'm going to mispronounce his middle name, Snar Magnusson from Iceland. And with his film, he uses a mix of Super 8 footage that was passed down through his family, VHS tape footage that he took himself in the 80s and 90s, and then modern digital footage. It goes in parallels as he's telling you the story of his grandparents who met and fell in love because of their interest in studying the glaciers of Iceland. As he's telling the story of how they age and you know disappear from life, how that really mirrors the way the glaciers in Iceland are disappearing. Part of the film follows the first official dead glacier in Iceland, the Ok Glacier. And Andri, as a writer, was tasked with basically creating a eulogy for that site, like a bronze plaque that sits there explaining this was the home of a glacier. That glacier is no more. It should have been here for, you know, hundreds, thousands more years, but due to climate change, it disappeared before anyone thought scientifically possible. And you know, it's very much a cautionary tale of what we risk to lose as a planet if climate change doesn't slow down or stop. But I wouldn't say it's heavy-handed. It's much more of a sweet, intimate look at the life of this family whose professions and hobbies have intersected with their love for these glaciers, what these glaciers mean for Iceland in terms of not just flora and fauna, but also tourism and things like that, and how rapidly that is changing and disappearing.
One of the things you noted in your review of it for the site is that the author, Magnusson, was surprised because he's written a book that inspired this documentary, and apparently the documentarian was weaved in more of his personal account.
Yeah. So I specifically, like, the film really shows him as a dad with his children and like trying to pass along, this family interest and history to them. And like, so his book was also called Time and Water. I haven't read it, but allegedly his book is more about the fact that, and this is a Frozen 2 theme, that ice contains memory. Anyone who's seen Frozen 2 probably remembers that integral part of the story. And he explains what that means in the film, that like, within each layer of a glacier, and like it gets bluer the older it is, there's air bubbles trapped in there that can tell you a lot about what the climate was like, what the major pollutants may have been, what kind of pollen was in the air. And as this ice melts, that kind of information is lost. And so there is a museum in Iceland that actually contains melted glacier water from different eras. There's still some things in that water that can be studied, but there's a lot that gets lost as the ice melts. So that's where the theme Time and Water sort of came from his book. And his book, I think, was more about the science of it. But Sarah Doser made it much more of an emotional parallel with the family. And part of that includes his grandfather, before he passed, one of the couple who met because of their love of glaciers. He gets dementia in his later years and loses a lot of his memory. So it's almost like a poetic narrative of like his ice has melted. He's lost part of that knowledge that was in his head, part of that knowledge that is in the ice. And things like that. Also, the film didn't touch on it, but like just from reading National Geographic, like it's always interesting when a glacier melts to a point where like a fully preserved woolly mammoth is available for study. And like, once it's out of the ice, it's very quickly going to start to decay like any entity. But this is, so there's things like that are happening with a lot of these glacial thaws around the world too, that are interesting, but also a bit of a danger. Like if someone's not there to find like, hey, there could be a dinosaur in there, like fully preserved. And if someone's not there to see it, like.
Before we get to the next one, as those of you who've seen Wonder Man know, we are concerned about the disappearance of Josh Gad on the set of Cash Grab 2. We hope that he is found soon. And if you don't get that, you need to watch Wonder Man.
I have not watched Wonder Man, but your context clues are telling me Josh Gad is actually fine.
I don't want anyone to worry, but I'm playing into the bit. Okay. What's number 4?
Number 4, also from ESPN, the Brittany Griner story. Now, this one was interesting because obviously it's from ESPN, but really the core of the film is about the thing that people know Brittany Griner from best, being locked up for almost a year in a Russian gulag for having less than 1 milligram of cannabis oil in a partially used vape cartridge that she didn't mean to include in her luggage. And she was used as kind of a political pawn in that time. So the documentary opens very nicely with her at the 2024 Olympics in Paris. They're, doing the parade of flags, and she's saluting the American flag and just getting very overwhelmed and emotional. Mm-hmm. And like, then it flashes back to the thing about this documentary, unlike Billie Jean King, where it starts with an event and then goes back and tells you everything up to that event and then everything after that event. This one is more like ping-ponging back and forth. Maybe there's a basketball term. I'm not sports affiliated enough to know. But yeah, the ball's traveling back and down the court. So it's like you'll get the story of her arrest, and then you'll get the story of like what she was doing before that arrest. It was around Valentine's Day. She had spent a romantic weekend with her wife. She kind of delayed packing to the last minute, like many of us are prone to do, and just was in a scramble to pack and get to the airport. And then it starts to go back kind of in slices. I think first they talk about why she was playing in Russia. She had done it for 7 years. The WNBA pay scale is about 1% of what an NBA star typically makes. And so a lot of women in the WNBA play internationally when they're off season because they can make a lot more money playing overseas in places where women's basketball is a much bigger draw. And that is the case in Russia. And so it was, the kind of thing where like she considered Russia a second home. It wasn't really much of a big deal. She knew the rules and didn't mean to bring this mostly empty vape cartridge. But when she got there, it was security was very different than normal. They were pulling anyone who wasn't a Russian citizen aside and doing a mandatory bag check and person check. And that's when and how they found this tiny little bit of cannabis oil that was on her that she was not trying to intentionally bring into the country. And from there, it was everything snowballed. You get to meet her parents. She talks about her upbringing in Texas, how she even discovered basketball, because despite being athletic as a kid, basketball wasn't her main focus. It kind of found her because of her height and wingspan. One day when she was playing volleyball in 8th grade, follows her into college and coming to terms with her sexuality and things like that. So it's obviously a very personal film in the long run. But I would say like 75% of it concerns the whole getting detained in Russia, getting jailed in Russia, what it was like in the Gulag, the quest to get her out, the politics involved. So it's very different from a typical ESPN 30 for 30 because it dealt, I would say, much less with the sport, much more with the personhood, which usually they go hand in hand in a 30 for 30. And here it felt like this could have easily been like maybe something destined for like ABC News or something like that. Like it didn't feel like it necessarily needed to be ESPN. It felt like it's at ESPN because Brittany Griner is a basketball player. But I loved it. Again, it's number 4 on my list.
Cool.
What if I told you? Okay, that brings us to number 5.
Number 5 is, I think, the buzziest film out of Sundance this year, The Invite, which is directed by Olivia Wilde. She also co-stars in it. This film, it's basically all set in one apartment during a single night. It kind of felt a little bit like a play. And Olivia Wilde and Seth Rogen play a married couple. Their upstairs neighbors, played by Penelope Cruz and Edward Norton, come over for a dinner party that Seth Rogen's character doesn't want to happen, didn't know was happening. And there's a lot of friction already because this upstairs couple has been making a lot of noise at night that bothers him and keeps him awake. And so as this dinner party progresses, more and more starts to unravel. It is very much a comedy. There is also a dramatic element to it. And despite the theme of the fact that Penelope Cruz and Edward Norton eventually invite Olivia Wilde and Seth Rogen to join them in the boudoir for some of their late night loud fun, nothing particularly graphic happens. Like any attempts at such just result in things going horribly awry in funny ways. But yeah, that's getting a lot of buzz. There's good reason for it. It's a somewhat uncomfortable comedy, but it's one that like feels mainstream enough that I sort of was surprised it went to Sundance to begin with, because a lot of Sundance films just generally feel very independent, and this one felt more mainstream despite being independent. My understanding is this one's in a bit of a bidding war at the moment.
It just landed at A24.
Okay, A24 picked it up. That makes sense for them. I understand Searchlight was interested in it at one point. But yeah, for A24, I think this is going to be probably one of their more mainstream films because it has the star power for it. It's got an interesting premise. You can kind of imagine yourself in Seth Rogen's shoes, or at least I could for a lot of the time as this is all happening, and he's just like, "What? Why? What?" Like it was interesting. I liked it a lot.
Olivia Wilde, Seth Rogen, Mark Ruffalo,
and Penelope Cruz.
Oh wow!
Not Mark Ruffalo, Edward Norton. Wrong Hulk. And Olivia Wilde too. Like it's really a major feat that she directed this and starred in it, because she is in pretty much every scene. And this is a very different role for her than I've seen her play before. Like it's much more of an awkward character. I feel like she usually plays a more confident, well-adjusted person. And she did it seemingly so effortlessly. And I they talked about that during the Q&A. Edward Norton and Seth Rogen have both had directing experience, and they both praised that about how difficult it is just to direct. It's even more difficult when you're directing and acting. And for the level of performance she was giving while doing that was also another big hurdle. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are like multiple award noms specifically for Olivia Wilde for this film, including actress and director, because that was pretty crazy.
I love that it made you as the viewer feel a bit uncomfortable. I mean,
Yes.
that feels well directed, because whatever's going on screen, you internalized enough to yourself kind of be a little squirmy. I love it.
No. I mean, really, Seth Rogen's character. I mean, not that everyone will identify with everything with him, but he is the person in that moment when the real invite comes out. That you can just feel yourself being like, yeah, I'm not going to want to spend any more time with these people who just came over for some wine and cheese, and now they're asking us to do other things. Like, it's very different. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I think it's going to be a big deal when it eventually comes out through A24, and I'm glad. I mean, I'm not surprised that it got picked up. Would have been cool for Searchlight to get it, because I think this one's going to be big, but it is what it is.
Seth Rogen from Muppet Show fame.
Of Muppet Show fame, yes.
Okay, so that brings us to number 6.
Number 6 is the only family film that I saw this year at Sundance. It's called Fing! Fing. This is based on a children's book. I think it's a short picture book. And from what I understand, the film is very much expanded from that. But this is from a Australian and United Kingdom based crew. It very much felt in the spirit of a lot of the Roald Dahl film adaptations, paired with the general plot synopsis of E.T. So if you take Veruca Salt from Willy Wonka and make her kind of the main character and the daughter of like the teacher that Matilda loved, who maybe had a spouse who was her equal in terms of kindness and interest in books. So pair them as the parents. That's Mia Wasikowska, and I forget the name of the actor who played the dad. Veruca Salt is their child. She's obviously a terror, constantly wants something, and as soon as she gets it, she's on to the next thing. Eventually, she has run out of things to want and demands a thing, thinking she made something up. But it turns out there is this mythical one-eyed fuzzball creature called a Fing that the dad goes out and gets. And when he gets it, it's like everything in her life suddenly makes sense. Very much like E.T. and Elliot having their symbiotic connection and being kind of one and the same. At the same time, Taika Waititi plays this outlandish character, the Viscount, who has his own like zoo of amazements, like wild creatures in cages, and it's very, very circus-esque. He's very much like a ringmaster type character. Taika Waititi is allowed to be totally unhinged in the role. He's very funny in it, like he is in most things, but he gets to do a lot more physical comedy than I think I've seen him do in a while. And a lot of his elements reminded me of the Dr. Seuss live action film, The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T, starring Hans Conried. So it gave me a lot of those vibes. There were also quite a few nods to like films that our generation grew up with. There's clear, obvious nods to The Rocketeer and Raiders of the Lost Ark in the film. This is one where without ever going to a place of vulgarity or like double entendres, was very appealing for an adult audience. And there were also quite a few kids there who also seemed entertained throughout. Like I didn't see the kids getting restless at any point. It was very colorful, very fun. It comes from Sky, which in the US, Sky productions are often distributed by NBC Universal, but not always. So I'm curious to see where this film eventually goes domestically. It didn't feel like it would be foreign on Disney Plus. I have a feeling it'll end up at Peacock, but this was really well done, and Taika Waititi was incredible in it.
I'm trying to wrap my head around the fact that the actress who's a mother in this was Alice in the Tim Burton.
You want to know what too? This is her second film that I saw her in Sundance this year. She was also the mother in Leviticus. And in Leviticus, she's the mother of a teenager. In Fing, she's the mother of like an 8-year-old, but
Dude.
still, yes. Alice in Wonderland, the Tim Burton film, was 2009.
I think 10, but yeah, right in that, right around there.
2026. So
Yeah,
if Alice
so not okay.
had a 16-year-old now, it probably tracks,
Not okay.
sadly. Because Alice in that film was of marrying age. Like that was part of the plot. Yeah. So here we are.
It's rough.
Welcome to the future.
The years go by.
Yes.
Where are we at? Number 7?
Number 7, it's a small documentary called TheyDream. This one was very, very personal. My computer's going slow, so I'm having a hard time pulling up the director's name. But it's the director of the film has archived a lot of his conversations with his grandparents, his parents, and he uses animation to create a picture of kind of, it's almost like interwoven shorts, like a package feature. What I loved was he does a lot of handmade models, and it's like he's showing you the craft behind the art form throughout the film. So like it opens with him like in his model shop building a model of the trailer home that he grew up in as a child, and then he crafts these figures of his parents and him as a child and puts them in there. So there are times where it's stop motion animation, times where it's hand drawn animation, times where it's more experimental 3D animation with like Spider-Man into the multiverse type effects going on. There's the story of his. Oh, sorry.
No, I believe is it William David Caballero?
Yes, thank you,
You're
William
welcome.
David Caballero. And so, I mean, as you hear his stories, ultimately they all culminate in like who he is, why he is who he is. He also does it for his dog too. So for Benji as a selling point, his dog Gustav gets a whole section. Gustav. And it's really sweet. There was a moment that really reminded me of Carousel of Progress, because his dad had diabetes that led to kidney failure, so he was on dialysis. And there are these scenes. Stay with me. There are these scenes that take place in the hospital, and the set that he built, this miniature, hospital, he built it on like a little Lazy Susan. And so to change the scenes, he basically like rotates the set. And so it's like you see a scene in this slice, then the set rotates. You see a scene in this slice of the set, this set rotates. That's what I mean when I say had this, like, it felt like to me an homage of Carousel of Progress. It was really well done.
400 degrees.
Yes, it was really well done, really sweet. And obviously as a fan of animation, I'm always interested when somebody does something with that medium that isn't your typical animated feature or short. This is the second mostly animated documentary I've seen thanks to Sundance. The first was Flea, which I think is still on Hulu. That one was animated out of necessity because it was about a gay man who had fled his home country due to war, ended up kind of in the middle of nowhere. But it was more of like, I can't have my identity known. My family's lives will be put at risk if the story is out there with me attached. So it was more like, we can tell this story, but you can't see me. And so everything is animated. This one was more of like healing through art, because there's at some point there's either trauma along the way or missing people. One of the things that's sweet about it is both William David Caballero and his mom get to sort of like stop motion or live action reference their parents. So he does it for his dad, he has his mom do it for her mom, so they're like lip syncing to audio of their parents, and trying to mimic their mannerisms to bring them to life again through animation. And again, like the film keeps showing you the behind the scenes process of all these stories that they're telling. So it's very much a back and forth. And it was very different from anything I've ever seen. Very beautiful. Now this one was funded in part by the Latino Public Broadcasting Service. So this is going to be on PBS eventually. I don't know how long they're planning to wait, but that's the ultimate destination for TheyDream.
And what's interesting is that it's directed by someone with last name Caballero, and you described it as a package feature.
Yes. that is also a fun little Disney connection. But he's a lone caballero.
Yeah, that'll make the song a little less interesting. But anyway, number 8.
So number 8 is Soul Patrol. This is an independently made documentary, but something that I do feel could be at home at either National Geographic or on Hulu through Onyx Collective, which is how Summer of Soul got there. Now, this is the somewhat untold story of a group in the Vietnam War of all Black specialized soldiers. The writer of the book, Ed, and again, my computer is acting up, so opening a second link isn't going to work for me to get his full name for you. But his goal in writing the book was that since this group had disbanded in the late 60s, they had not had any contact with each other, and he had spent a lot of his life reckoning with what they had done there, reckoning with the world that they were protecting and what it was like when they came back, and wanting to reconnect. So when he wrote the book, he was very hopeful that it would bring them all back together. The documentary frames everything around the last reunion that these guys have had together. It's the last because it was 50 years since, and even since that section of the film was made, a lot of them have passed on.
I'm able to pull up that review. It's an adaptation of Ed Emanuel's memoir, and the director is J.M. Harper.
Thank you very much. So yeah, Ed Emanuel, who sort of becomes the main character, but J.M. Harper did interview all of the other surviving members of the group. They also, what's really incredible is they submitted their own Super 8 home video footage. I guess at this time, Super 8 cameras were about as prevalent as cell phones are. Like, most young people had one and would, take little video of some of the important moments in their life. So a lot of them had video from like before they enlisted, had video from while they were there. When there are moments that were not captured, particularly battles, they use reenactments. But J.M. Harper also brings those reenactments in a very poignant way about how Ed and his fellow servicemen were kind of haunted by the things that they had done, by having the actors who play them in the reenactments sort of appear in the present when he's talking about things. So it's like there's this visual dichotomy of like, we're also haunted by all this, but it really sets up the tone of like the civil rights movement, that they were all shipped out very shortly after the Martin Luther King assassination and the first attempt on Kennedy's life, and just going to war for a country that it felt like wasn't necessarily having their backs in all the ways that it should, but still being committed to doing the job. The rarity of being on an all Black troop, the successes that they had, and the notoriety that they were denied because of their race, and how it took a long time to even get this story told, because if several of them had like tried to get a journalist interested, and in all of those times the publication would be like, no one's going to believe this, no one wants this story, and so it just really wasn't told for a very long time. And so I haven't read the book, but obviously for anyone who read the book, it's kind of a must-see film because it fills in chapters of like what happened since the book was released. That's a really important part of the story. And for everyone else, obviously it brings to life this story in a very visual way. A lot of these people, they turned in their Super 8 film to Ed as kind of just trusting him with it, because they either knew they were going to pass on and wanted something good to be done with it, or didn't have anyone else to give it to. And so it's kind of a beautiful wrap up that it all ended up finally making it to the screen in a really sweet way. And it was an inspiring story. The director, in his introduction, this was the morning after the latest killing in Minneapolis, and so he kind of set the tone of like, we can survive dark times by looking at people who have survived them before. And when you put into context the Martin Luther King assassination preceding the events of this film, it really did feel a little hopeful in that regard.
Number 9.
Numero 9 is the last of the 4 Disney entries. This is from Searchlight Pictures. It's called In the Blink of an Eye. This is from director Andrew Stanton, who Pixar fans will know from Finding Nemo, WALL-E, A Bug's Life. Disney fans may also know him as the director of John Carter, Not of Mars. Were you going to add something, Benji?
I was going to say Toy Story 5.
He's directing Toy Story 5. He's also done live action work in TV, including Stranger Things. In the Blink of an Eye, it's a script from Colby something or other. Now their script was submitted like to Hollywood and ended up on a blacklist in 2016, which is how Andrew Stanton first discovered it because it had not found a home, and he fell in love with it. They call it a triptych, and my only other experience with a triptych film was that Yorgos Lanthimos movie that came out after Poor Things, which was very weird. That was like a package feature. That was like 3 separate shorts that had interconnecting themes, had some recurring cast, but not recurring characters. This one, everything overlaps. It's not like you watch one story, then you watch another story, then you watch another story. Everything moves in parallels. One story is one of the last Neanderthal families on Earth, and their story intersects them with kind of the first Homo sapien families on Earth. That is paralleled with a contemporary story about 2 college students, Rashida Jones and Daveed Diggs. Now, their story stretches a pretty long span of time. It takes them from their college years to their end of days, so it spans decades, but it's sort of their love story, starting a family, with them both coming from scientific backgrounds. It's partially about what one of their offspring does with his life. The other story, starring Kate McKinnon, takes place far into the future. She is a genetically advanced human who ages at a much slower rate than a naturally born human, who is on this mission to repopulate another planet that is hundreds of years away. And so she's the only human on this ship with all these plants. There is an AI companion that she has who kind of keeps her on task and also is her only friend. And then there are these embryos there are these machines that she has to like grow the embryos into children as they get closer to the planet so that there are people to populate the planet with when they get there. That section of the film feels very WALL-E, and Thomas Newman's score also comes into play. And so his score feels very akin to the score for WALL-E and Finding Nemo. The big difference here is he uses a lot of choral voices in there, and especially like for the prehistoric segments, it all feels a little bit more grounded, a little less electronic in that regard. But all of these stories progress in tandem. So like as the Neanderthal family might be dealing with loss, so too might be Rashida Jones. So too might be Kate McKinnon. As they're dealing with a birth, so too are Rashida Jones and Daveed Diggs. So too is Kate McKinnon. And so ultimately the theme of the film is, despite all of our technological advances, despite how much the world changes, human behavior has been basically what it is. We were born, we are grown and raised, we find somebody to love, we repeat the cycle. And so it's kind of like that longevity never ends, is what I would say is the takeaway of the film. It's very sweet and charming. It's funny in a very light way. It does feel uniquely Andrew Stanton, particularly his tone from WALL-E. I think it's a very different film. I can see why they're putting this straight to Hulu instead of giving it a theatrical run. But it was beautiful. It already won a prize at Sundance. It's not an audience award, but it's the Alfred P. Sloan Prize. I don't quite know the significance of that. Like, I don't necessarily know who Alfred P. Sloan was. But it's already an award-winning film when it comes to Hulu at the end of February. I think it's February 27th. Is the launch date. So we don't have long to wait. It basically was like had its premiere and marketing push at Sundance. Yeah, I mean, if you're an Andrew Stanton fan, it's worth giving a look, especially just the way it really parallels WALL-E in a lot of ways and themes. And sort of with the whole theme of Kate McKinnon's character, they never explain like why they need to repopulate this other planet, which in Wall-E it was like we knew that Earth got beyond repair in terms of pollution, but it wasn't explicitly clear like exactly what happened. Like you got the impression that by and large was very much responsible for it, but it was like never overt like why things needed to change. And that's the same case here. It's like you get the prelude to these genetically modified humans like Kate McKinnon in the end of the Rashida Jones story, and then it's like you don't know that before. It's like it all makes sense. All these puzzle pieces kind of come into play later.
So that brings us to number 10.
Numero 10. So this was a documentary that I feel like National Geographic could and should acquire. It's called The Last Winter, K2. If you were a fan of Free Solo, it's another mountain climbing documentary. K2, it's the second largest mountain in the world, second to Everest. It has been considered impossible to climb in the winter for a long time. It's geographically positioned where it just gets these extreme high winds and sudden fluctuations in temperature that make it very difficult to reach the top. It's a professional mountain climber whose life's goal was to kind of have a first. And so they call it the last first because it's like the last peak that hasn't been achieved in the winter specifically. It's been achieved in the other seasons, but winter specifically has never been done. So it starts out with him and two Sherpas, and this is like a very personal story. It's all his and their private camera footage documenting their trip. Then a basically like social media star who does a lot of death-defying stunts shows up with a huge swarm of Sherpas, like 30 Sherpas, and he's known for doing things like flying in on a helicopter like midway up the mountain and only doing like half of it. So they kind of set that up that like he's not on the same level of like committed mountain climber as the other guy we've been following. So then it becomes somewhat of like what was going to be a very difficult goal to begin with is now being overshadowed by almost like a race. Like now there's competition. And then a commercial mountain climbing company shows up with tourists, not professional climbers. There's a few professional climbers among them, but there's a lot of people who have never climbed a mountain before who show up at the hardest to climb mountain in the worst season to do it for vacation. And so this one's very different. Obviously, Free Solo was like Alex Honnold's specific quest to climb El Capitan. This is this one person's quest being thrown way off balance by all of these other human forces, in addition to the harsh climate on K2. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to spoil anything, but it was gripping, it was shocking, and I think anybody who likes something like Free Solo is going to really appreciate this film, which is part of why I feel like National Geographic would be a really great home for it, because they've already got that built-in audience. The directors of Free Solo, they've continued to work with on other documentaries. The Patagonia documentary a couple of years ago was from that same team. And so this just feels like it would have a good home there alongside those other films in that vein.
Okay. Sounds terrifying to me, but
it was. And there were, I remember when Free Solo came out, like we went to see it in the theater, and there were times where, the shots were like giving you a little bit of vertigo. Uh-huh. And this did that, but on a different scale, because in Free Solo, nobody dies. And in this, there are multiple casualties. So.
Oh, wow. Okay. Intense.
Very, very intense.
Okay.
Gripping, pun intended.
Yep.
So to recap, the Disney movies were at position number 2, 3.
We had 2, 3, 4, and 8.
8. So we have 3 of them pretty up top there, and then you have the Enter Sandman film in the blink of an eye. So,
and when I say like, obviously, caveat to this list, this is just my opinion. I am not a critical consensus. I am not the be all end all.
Where's your line of though where you consider it a good movie? Like, which of these is there a line where you're like, oh, this is kind of where
There's no, okay. These top 10 films, I liked all of them. There's none of these where I was like, these aren't good films. There were two films that I saw that were not good films. If you want me to talk about those, I can, but I hate trashing somebody's hard work.
Well, just think with the films. I mean, we can just briefly, the reviews are up on Laughing Place, but
the reviews are up on Laughing Place. One is Carousel, starring Chris Pine and Jenny Slate. This is a very slow burn, second chance at love story. High school sweethearts didn't end up together. Now Chris Pine's character is single again, and Jenny Slate is back in the picture. But my main problem with this film, obviously, the title Carousel. There's no merry-go-round in the film. It is about how life is cyclical and repeats itself, and moves in ways that come back around to each other. There's just a lot in the movie that is never ever explained. It's like they drop you in the middle of these people's lives. They're talking about their lives as if they know what's happening, but you as the audience are never clued in. And that was very frustrating. There were a lot of things that were like set up and you're leaning in like, oh, this is going to be meaningful. And there's never any payoff. And so it was very frustrating in that regard. Everyone in it is talented. It has some really beautiful cinematography. But there was just this major creative choice that drove me bonkers. And also throughout, this was like the first night of Sundance that film premiered. And throughout the festival, when I would talk to other people about what they saw, what they liked, anybody I encountered who saw Carousel did not like Carousel. So I'm sorry to everyone who worked hard on Carousel. It's a beautifully shot film. There's some very good performances. I didn't like it. The other film that I didn't like was a documentary from Irish filmmaker Sinead O'Shea called All About the Money. This was about Fergie Chambers. His full name is James Cox Chambers Jr. He was an heir to the Cox Media empire fortune. He had a fallout with the family, sold all his stake in it. He's worth hundreds of millions, and he's a radical figure. Hi, you want to come closer? Come on over. I'll touch you if you come over here. He's a radical figure. The documentary started as an attempt to chronicle a communist community that he was building in the Northeast, and he was also trying to start a chain of jujitsu gyms that would be like a leftist training ground. Like you'd come to the gym for jujitsu, you'd walk out as like I don't want to say radicalized because that feels wrong, but like
but I understand what you mean. Mm-hmm.
Indoctrination. I don't know what you want to call it. Like getting people on to his wavelength in terms of political views. Things don't go as planned, and this documentary takes a lot of weird turns. Part of the reason it just doesn't work as a film is Fergie Chambers would close his life off to the filmmaker and then open it up again randomly. So there's all these time jumps where there's like, we're getting, and then here's the other issue is she only ever gets his side of the story or the people who were involved in this, this commune. But if there's like facts that should be checked, they're not. If there's misclaims that that seem outlandish, I'll spoiler, in the last act, in what feels like an attempt at I need some sympathy because I realize this is all looking bad, he claims to be queer, but it's like he's been married multiple times to women. He has children with multiple women. Like at no point in his past did that ever come into play. And so it seems all of a sudden like out of left field, he's obsessed with the collected works of Oscar Wilde. And despite being married to a woman and having kids, he's like, I'm queer. Don't hate on me. So yeah, it was a rough film. I would also say, like, just in everything that I've learned about him since the film, just trying to understand why this was made, he's not the type of person that like you would willingly go watch a documentary film about. So I think this was probably a project that should have been scrapped when what it started out to be ended up failing because this communist community didn't end up doing what it had achieved and all fell apart. so yes, it was a difficult watch. I spent more time than I want to thinking about it since then, and the more I think about it, the more I'm just like, why was this made? There's a fun podcast called How Did This Get Made? They tend to only talk about like films that were commercial, so I doubt they will tackle this. But this would be a subject if they ever run out of films for a future episode of How Did This Get Made?
Well, thanks, Alex.
I know. You've been to a lot of these Sundance, and I'm just curious because one of the things that I noticed in your reviews is that there were a couple of actors that popped up several times, it seems, in the film. Is that a common dynamic where it's like within a certain period? Because I feel like Sundance films maybe have a certain kind of mystique or certain kind of genre or focus around them. Is that common that you'll end up seeing the same actor several times throughout your event?
There are, and I think like there's a couple of factors that come into play. Some actors like who genuinely walk the walk of like, I do what I do for the art, not the money, yada yada yada, end up in a lot of independent films because they're not so much looking for the next thing that's going to make me money. They're looking for the next thing that they feel attached to. So like Mia Wasikowska was also for Leviticus, she was an executive producer on it in addition to acting in it. She wasn't an executive producer on Fing. I don't know that they necessarily go into the films thinking like, oh, this is going to go to Sundance. Mm-hmm. In some cases, a film is backed by the Sundance Institute and then it's going to go to Sundance. But with that exception, there's no guarantee that your film gets selected by Sundance. That being said, stars bring people to Sundance. So I think if you're an independent film that has a known name attached, it's probably a higher likelihood that you get into Sundance with it being mediocre versus without having big names attached. So something like Carousel probably only really got in because it had Chris Pine and Jenny Slate, and they could guarantee that they would show up to the festival, and that's going to attract attention. Before his downfall, Armie Hammer had kind of made himself a specialty in the independent film genre. Obviously, he had like a height of his career where he had some mainstream work and nothing really took off. Like he was the star of Disney's The Lone Ranger. And so for the bulk of his career past, Social Network, I think, started as an independent film. But like after Mirror Mirror, after Lone Ranger, like after Cars 3, it was kind of like most of what he did was in the independent space. And so some actors, I think that's just their home turf. And so you end up getting a lot of them at Sundance. But it's hit or miss. And then also like, I don't know, it is very much an actors, a directors, a crafts festival, different from like ATX. I'm sorry, not ATX. South by Southwest. Okay. South by Southwest is much more of like, we're here for the general fans, like casual moviegoer. Like Sundance is very much like everyone's in the industry. Like you feel an outsider being there and not being in the industry because 90% of the people there are in the industry.
Okay.
Well, Alex, thanks for walking us through 13 movies if you had in hoppers. That's a lot of film to talk about.
We'll be back. Yeah, my eyes have been tired this week because I've been looking at so much light.
We'll be back next month to talk about whatever comes up in the wonderful world of Disney film, including probably a little bit more about hoppers as we get closer to that release date and whatever else gets announced and discussed between now and then. So thanks so much for joining us for Movie Talk, and we hope to see you guys real soon. Bye, everybody.